Welcome to Blender Frenzy, I'm Justin, and today in this video we are going to take our two reference images and project them onto our geometry so that we can create a result that looks like this very quickly, very easily, without doing much more modeling or adding much more detail. We're letting the textures, the materials, the reference images themselves add the detail for us so that we can have some inspiration for what the final product will be. Now, this isn't going to be the final product, but it's going to give us that boost of motivation and inspiration that we can visualize maybe what the end product is going to be. So when you're ready, let's get started. If you're following along with the series and you've downloaded this blend file, this is what you should see. These are just images that are set up for you for reference so that you can build your own Terminator skull in reference to these images here. To get access to that, it's free. You can come to my website, blenderfrenzy.com. If you just want the single download, just go to downloads and then you can download the blend file here. You can also check out the Blendinator, which is my new course on head tracking VFX. You can click take a look and scroll down to see what it's all about. It is also on Blender Market, so if you go to blendermarket.com, go to training, and it is still one of the staff picks, so I'm super proud about that. It will also be on Gumroad eventually if you want to go that route. But for now, if you've downloaded the blend file, this is what you'll be working with. And also, if you've been following along, you know I'm working with two completely different images that are separate from each other and separate from my blend file because I can't distribute them because they're not my images. But I just found these images online, just took screenshots of them, and I'm just showing you how I originally put two images together in order to build out the Terminator skull myself. So having said all that, this is where we are, and we added a little bit of a, it's not really a shader, it's just in solid shaded mode. We added a matte cap on that to kind of get a feel for the metal that is around it. And in this video, we're actually going to be adding materials onto it using our reference images and making our own metallic material from that. But before that, I want to make a few minor adjustments here. I'm going to add in a loop cut right here on the side of the gear pan, like this, all the way out to this edge, and show you what that's doing here is that it's giving this a little bit of a harder edge. So if I double G to slide that, you can see the difference here. So we had it, it's a little bit more rounded, and then if I pull it towards the edge, you can see it's just defining this outside edge a little bit more. And it might be easier to see actually if we come over to our original matte cap that we were using. So you can kind of see that there, that, and then if I double G again, you can see the difference. So that's good. The other thing that I want to do is get a little bit more definition here on the nose. So I'm going to take, let's go in here. I'm going to take these four faces right here. To inset those like that. And then let's go down to the bottom here. Vertex select, press K for the knife tool, click and then pull over. Now I can't snap to anything over here because it's actually a mirror modifier. So I'm just going to snap it straight, get it as straight as I can here. Click, enter, and then it will mirror that over. I'm going to do it also up here because if I don't, you can see that it's pinching. So we're giving this a little bit more definition here with this point kind of coming out for the nose. So that's why we're doing this. And we will also focus on the nose just a little bit in another video. So K, click, click, enter. And then there you go, that cleaned that up a little bit. This is also giving us more geometry to work with later when we extrude the nose. But again, that is not for this video. We are now ready to use our reference images and project a material onto them, mixing together the front and the side so that we have this complete Terminator skull just from two images. This is one of my all-time favorite things to do in Blender is projection mapping. I love it. It's a way that you can add so much detail with just a few images. So let's get to it. I'm going to duplicate this workspace just by right-clicking and selecting duplicate, double-click, type project, And now these two are identical, but I'm going to change this area over here. If we scroll on this menu bar, then I select this button, change this to the shader editor, press N, and get my screencast keys over here. And let's go into material preview mode. Now I'm using Eevee right now as the render engine, and that is what is used by default in the material preview mode. So it looks something like this because we don't have a material. You can see if I hover over this menu bar, I can scroll back and forth. And if I click this button here, you see no results found. You might have a default material that's already in there. That's not a problem. But if you haven't worked with shader nodes before or materials in Blender, I want to show you how these things are connected because it's going to help us later. So over on your properties, if you come down to the material tab, you can see we have these options over here. Now you see these three options because we're actually still in edit mode. So I'm going to tab out into object mode, and then those three buttons go away. We don't need those right now. I just want to show you the correlation between the shader editor and this panel over here. So this button and this button are the same thing, and this drop down and that drop down are the same thing as well. So it doesn't matter which button we press. I'm going to click new to add in a new material. And you can see we have two nodes here. We've got a principled BSDF and a material output. Anything that's plugged into the material output node will be shown in the viewport. And you can see that the surface is principled BSDF. If I change that to emission, it will change this node to emission. Come here and change the color, and you can see it changes it over here. So these options here, strength, color, all of that stuff are over here. And then this is the node version. So I'm going to change that back to the principled. I'm going to actually disconnect it for now because we're going to use that later. And since I disconnected it, we see only black because there's nothing going into the surface right now. You can see none for the surface. And so I can click here and choose something here, but instead I'm going to come over here, press Shift A to add in. I'm going to do a search, and I'm going to start typing image texture. Now it comes up first for me because I've been using that a lot. So I'm just going to click that, and here is our image texture. Now if I plug this straight away into the surface, you can see it's still black because we don't have any image. So now we can come to our drop down, and we have our skull front and our skull side reference images in the drop down because they already exist in our Blender file. So I'm going to choose the front, and then I'm going to pull this out so that we can see the whole name. And now you can see we have a very psychedelic version of our front. You can kind of see here's the front forehead, but the rest is being warped and stretched in all different kinds of ways. And the reason this is happening is because we haven't set up our UVs properly. So let's go to the UV editing workspace, and then I'm just going to hide the cameras, and let's just get rid of that as well. And if I select everything by pressing A, you can see our UVs over here represent a two-dimensional version of all of our geometry over here. And if we go into material preview mode here, and then let's just disable the overlays here for now. I'm going to hover over here, press A to select everything. And if I press G to drag these around, you can see it starts to affect what I see on my geometry. Of course, these are all messed up still, so we need to fix them. Now there are a whole bunch of different tips and tricks on how you can unwrap materials around 3D geometry, but we're not going to do any of that in this series. We're going to do something very straightforward, very simple, and that is project from view. We're just doing a projection onto our geometry from a particular point of view that we are located in 3D space. So for example, if I come around here like this at this angle, I can project from this view to get a representation of this same thing in 2D space. But let's look at our UV maps. So this is where you're going to find this. It's going to be on the Data tab under UV Maps. And this is the UV map that we're going to be messing with here. Now I'm going to title this UV Front. And you can see if I hover over this menu and scroll over, you can see I've have the UV front here. So I can select it here if there are multiple, or I can select it over here, but it's the only one we have for now. So let's go ahead and do this. Hover over the 3D view, press A to select everything, and then U, and then select Project from View. And now you can see we have this projection here. Of course, it's only half because we have our mirror modifier on still, so it's actually going to be looking like this. And so the size and the shape of the UVs over here in the 2D view are going to reflect my positioning in the 3D view. So if I scroll out like this and then I do the same thing, project from view, you can see now it's really far away. But if I zoom in and do the same thing, then it's going to be really big. And this took me forever to figure out because what I was doing is going into front mode to where we have everything lined up with our reference image. And then I would press U, project from view, and then it would be too small, so I'd come over here, select everything S to scale, which you can do also like that, and line everything up. But then if I added geometry or modified it anyway, I would have to do the same thing, and then I would do something like this, project from view, and then it was a different size, and I'd have to come in and resize it. And I had no idea that it was affected by the positioning of what I see in the 3D view. So that is why I have already set up the cameras for the front and the side at specific distances away from the geometry to where they match perfectly. So because this is the front view, I'm going to go into our front camera. So let's press 0 over here. Now this is the side, so let's change the active camera to the front. And now because I'm in camera mode, it doesn't matter how far I'm zoomed in or out. It's going to project from the camera. So with everything selected, you project from view, and now you can see it lines up perfectly. And if I scroll in, again, still in camera mode, you project from view, it's the same thing. And this is good for us to have exact placement of our viewport for projection, especially after we modified the geometry, which we are about to do. So you can see up here, our geometry exceeds the boundary of the head up here, as you can see as well over here. So let's change that. So I'm going to go back to our split workspace here. And I'm going to go out of subdivision. Let's select, let's do, oh yeah, we have to go into edit mode and select, let's select these faces here. And I'm going to just grab those and pull those down a little bit. And then let's take these faces here, grab and pull those in, these faces, and then pull those in. Okay, that looks good there. Let's see what it looks like up here. Oh yeah, that looks a lot better there. And this is probably too far in. So let's take these and just grab those and move those out. Make sure we're not messing anything up. Take these maybe and then pull those out a little bit more to make that a little bit more rounded. That goes off the image, which is all right. Okay, that looks a lot better shaped. Let's go ahead and save it. And then let's go back to our UV editing. And then we can select everything. And then make sure that we are on our UV front. Now, that's the only one we have right now, but when we add more, that's going to be really important to select the correct one. So in our camera mode, remember camera front, and then select everything, U, project from view, and the UVs in the 2D space line up a lot better with our image. And let's disable the overlays and go out here, and you can start to see what's happening here. Now I'm going to add some geometry and then reproject again. Let's just go out of subdivision for a moment here. I'm going to select, let's go into solid shaded mode. So I'm going to select 4 edges here, so maybe these 4 here, and then on the top. So I'm going to do shift select and then just select these ones here. And with 4 up here selected, 4 down here, I'm going to press Control F and then choose Grid Fill. And that'll be all right for now. So back in subdivision surface, this is what that looks like. Yeah, that's not too bad. But now we have to reproject. So let's go into camera mode, select everything, U, project from view, and then it will line everything up correctly here. Okay, so now let's take a look and see what we have. Let's turn our mirror modifier back on. And there we go. Already, just with one image, we have projected it onto our geometry the same way that we built our geometry around those reference images. And because we did it that way, it perfectly lines up like this. Now, of course, it's being stretched back on the sides, so we're getting a lot of warping and stretching on the sides. And then also on the back, you can see we have literally eyes in the back of our head, and that's just because it's projecting through the geometry. You can see if I select these faces on the back of the head, you can see if I press G to grab, you can see it's affecting just those, but I don't want to do that, so I'm going to right click to cancel that. We don't want to mess with those. But if you do and you accidentally mess everything up, well, all you have to do is select everything, go into front mode, and press U and project from view again, and then it will project it. And that's why I like having these cameras set up like this. Except for this isn't camera mode, so that would be 0. Okay, there we go. But you can see if I choose X-ray mode, you can see the selection that we have on the back of the faces. So it's projecting straight through to the back of the head, which is not ideal, but it's going to be fine for our purposes here. So I'm going to go to the layout here. Let's disable our cameras, go into material preview mode. So right now, if I go into top mode, our camera's over here somewhere and it's projecting the image straight on that way. But it's also projecting it straight on in the side, going this way, and again, straight through to the back of our head. And that's why you're getting this stretching over here, because it's not being projected onto the side, it's being just kind of stretched past it. So what we want instead is for the front to be projected this way, and then for the side to be projected from the side camera over this way. And that way we have two images projected on, and then we can mix between the two. And that is what is going to be our ultimate goal. So let's get our side projection working now. Let's go back to UV editing. So let's go into our camera mode. Let's make the cam side the active camera. Let's select everything, but we don't want to project just yet because we need to make another UV map. Right now we only have the front, and if we project it, it's just going to overwrite this one. So let's click plus here to add another one. I'm going to title this UV side. And now if I click back and forth, you can see it's the same exact thing, except for these are selected and these aren't. So with the UV side selected, make sure everything's selected, of course, in our 3D view, U and project from view. And now we have our UVs projected over here. Select everything here so you can see it a little bit better. And you can see our front and our side, depending on what we have selected. Now, when you select these back and forth like this, what you're doing is selecting the UV map index. And that is what is displayed over here. And this is going to be important when we come to texture painting. But there are two other selections, and that is our active render. So if we disable overlays and come out here, our active render is what's going to be projected onto the geometry. So right now it's the front, but if I click over here to the side, you can see it's being projected using the side UV map index. Notice that if I select the index itself, it doesn't change it in the 3D viewport. It's only changing it over here in the 2D viewport. But the active render changes it in the 3D viewport. And if we take the side UV index, these points over here, select everything, press G to grab, you can see that moving that is essentially telling where the projection is going to go. So that's why you see the front face kind of moving around on the geometry. So I'm going to right click to cancel that. Of course, this is using the wrong image. And what you might think if you're a beginner at this is, oh, all we have to do is come up here and change this to the side image, which does match perfectly over here to our geometry, which is good, but it doesn't change it over here. But we have this selected as side, and we have the active render as the side. So what is happening? Why isn't it projecting? Well, that's because if we come back to our project workspace over here, we only have the front reference image being plugged into the material output. And remember, our geometry only shows whatever is plugged into the material output. So if we change this to the side reference image, now the side reference image will be shown in the material output. So I'm going to come back to the UV editing workspace, and I'm going to open up another area over here. Let's choose this to be the shader editor so that we can see everything down here. So now that we have the skull side reference image being plugged into the material output, we can see it over here, and we have to make sure that the active render is on the side, because if we put it on the front, you can see it's using the side reference image, but it's being projected from the front. And so essentially we're using this index here like this. And if we move that index, you can see it's kind of like a kaleidoscope type of thing right here. Let me see. Right click to cancel that because I don't want to do that. What I want to do is force this reference image to use its appropriate UV map. So I'm going to go back to the front, and I want the front always to use the front projection no matter what I have selected over here. So we can force it in the nodes by coming to vector and pulling this out, selecting UV map, and then choosing front for the front. Now if I select the active render for the side and go back and forth, nothing changes. And this is going to be very, very useful for us. So we don't want this to change over here. We want to force it here. So I'm going to select both of these, Shift D to duplicate this down. We're going to do the same thing with the side. So let's change this to the side. Let's change this to the side. And then if we plug this one in, now it switches automatically right away, even though we have the front as the active render. And if we change that, it doesn't matter. Now, just keep in mind that these two UV maps represent the active render only. They don't represent the index itself. So when we're painting, we actually have to come over here and actively select which one we want to paint onto, which we'll do in just a little bit. First, we need to mix these. So we're done with our UVs for now. Let's go back to our project workspace. And we want to mix these two images. And the way we do that with the Node Wrangler add-on installed, which I think it is by default now in Blender 4.2, press Control Shift, right click on one of them, and then drag to the other. And then it will add this mix shader. You can also just Shift A, add in a color, mix color, and it's the same thing. So if I open that up, you can see this is the same thing. And let's move this out of the way again. Okay, so now it's mixing between both images here. It's at a factor of 50 or 0.5, so 50% each. So there's kind of overlaying on top of each other, and that's not what we want. But just to show you what's happening, if I bring the factor all the way down to 0, you can see we have 100% of the front image only. And that is because if you think about the factor being a factor for the B socket. So the B socket is our side image, of course. So we have 0% of our side image. But if we crank this all the way up to 1, we have 100% of our side image. And of course at 0.5, we have 0.5 of our side image, which then mixes between the two. So you can see a little bit of the front image, which is being plugged into A. So what we want to do is we want to plug something into the factor to tell us exactly where to put the side image. And that is what we're going to do right now by creating a black and white alpha mask. So I'm going to pull those down. I'm going to select this one, Shift D to duplicate that up. I'm going to plug in the UV side here as well because it's going to use the same thing. This is going to be the side. And then I'm going to click this X. We're going to create a new one, but we need to see what size. So let's click this one, press N to open up the panel. And then on our node tab under properties, we can see it's 712 by 898. I'm just going to be consistent and keep it there. So create a new image, title this mask side 712 by 898, enter. And counterintuitively, I'm going to uncheck alpha because we're not using transparency on the mask itself. We're using the mask as a black and white image for transparency on another image. So we're going to click new image. And now if we plug this one in straight away, you can see it's all black. And that is because if we come back to UV editing workspace, we can choose our new mask side image and it is all black. Now the numerical value for black in Blender translates to 0. So if I pull this down to 0 and then we plug this one back in, you can see it's a 0 of the B socket and 100% of the A socket. So we only have the front image showing. So if we take a fully black image and plug it into the factor, it shouldn't change anything because fully black image is 0. However, if I bring this to 1, which is 100% of the side image, and then I plug in the black image, it's going to change that to 0 and erase all of that. If I hover over here, press N, and I change this color all the way up to white, you can see it now has the opposite effect, because if black is 0, then white is 1. So that equals factor of 1, so nothing changes. But if I bring this down to 0, plug in a fully white image, now it's 100% side. So you probably see where I'm going with this. We're going to use our mask to paint on white only where we want the side image on our geometry. So let's bring this back down to 0 or black again. And let's go to our texture paint workspace now. Let's disable the cameras here. And now I can start to paint, but I want to make sure I'm painting on the right image. Now, right now it says mask side, which is good, but let me show you how these are all related. So I'm going to pull out another area over here, make this the shader editor again, so that we can see our nodes. And whatever I have selected here as an image texture, it should reflect it in each of these areas. So if I select the mask side, you can see each of these say mask side. If I select the side reference, then skull side reference over here, skull side reference over here. Now this, of course, is going to be in solid shaded mode. So if you're in material preview mode, it's going to be different, but let's stay in solid shaded mode for now. Let's select mask side, and now we can start painting. Now we're going to make sure we're painting on the side UV map index, and this is where this is going to be important. So under our data properties, UV maps, if I have the front selected and then I start painting white, you can see it has this really weird looking result. And that's because it's just using the front UV map index to paint onto. If I just click side, now you can see I'm painting onto the right one. If you want to see this better over here, you can uncheck display texture paint UVs. I can also paint in the 2D workspace as well. So I can paint in the 2D area, I can paint in the 3D viewport, and this is painting onto our mask. But I'm going to start over, so I'm going to come up to image, and then you see this little star here, that means it hasn't been saved. I can either save it, which we'll do eventually, but right now I'm going to click reload, and now it's all black. And now we have some options up here. So if we hover over this menu and scroll, we have a whole bunch of different options. Those same options are also over here on this tool tab, and we can scroll up and down like this. Now here are our color swatches, and I think this is similar to Photoshop and other image editing software, but if you hover over here, press X, it will swap those two. You can see the black and the white are swapped. So if I start painting white, I can come in and swap that and then start painting black. And it acts just like a mask, like in Photoshop. So we're painting onto the mask, but we're not seeing the results from that. So let's come up here to Material Preview, and as I start to paint white onto the mask, you can see we're starting to reveal the side image because the mask side is the factor for the side image. So as I paint, you can see more and more of that side image is revealed. And I'm just going to paint onto the side around the eyes because I don't want to paint the eyes themselves. In fact, we can come over here and kind of do this. Now, if you paint in the two-dimensional view, you'll bleed over, which is fine because it doesn't affect the model at all. So we can do that. Oh, also our painting, we can press F to change the radius. That's also up here. We can also pull down the strength over here, and then our fall off. And to see the fall off, actually come to cursor, fall off opacity. Let's turn that on and pull that up. And then you can see this little, just exit out of my mouse highlighter there. So there's the fall off, that's what it looks like. And then we can change that to different types of fall offs. And then that will give you different results in here, of course. I usually like this little curve that gives the best results there, I think. But once again, I'm going to reload this and then we're going to start painting. So I'm going to start painting with the white, of course. Start painting over here. And I can go around the model and paint. At this point, it doesn't matter where my perspective is because it's just painting on this 2D image for the mask. So I can be at different angles and it will still give me the same result no matter where I am. So I'm just going to come over here, do that. See, now I painted over here to the front and covered those eyes, but then you can see it's over here. So I'm going to bring that all the way back to black, which is going to make this little hole for the eyes to peer out again, which is kind of strange, but it's okay for our purposes here. So let's see, let's go back here and start painting on something like that. I don't want to go too far over here. Yeah, let's paint black on the front there. Okay, and then okay, so something like that is okay for now. Now we need to save. Oh, let's. I'm going to paint this here too. Just get all of that in here, and make sure we have. Oh, yep. So sometimes it's hard to see in some of these viewports. So just make sure you have everything painted. Okay, so now that we've got that, let's save this out because right now it is only existing in Blender, which means if we close and reopen Blender, we will lose that work. So let's save as. I'm just going to make a new material folder. I'm going to make this a JPEG and mask side is just fine. Save image. And now it's saved out. And let's come back to our project and look at what we have. If I control space over here, we can maximize this view and let's disable our overlays. Look at that. So we've already added a lot of detail with very little geometry. So this is all we have right now for our geometry. And we've just projected those images right on there. And it's just 2 images, giving it so much more detail. This would maybe even work for something in the background. So if you had Terminators walking in the background, you wouldn't need any more detail than this. So that's why I love projection mapping, because you could set up a whole background, world, environment, characters, animations to make your scene look a lot bigger and more vast with only a few images. So I love it. But we are going to make this even more awesome by modifying the material just a little bit. For the front image, I'm going to come over here and add in a hue, saturation, and value and plug it in here. Because if you look at this, this is more of a purple color and it doesn't quite match the side image. So I'm just going to take the hue and bring that down. I'm going to hold shift so that I can go a little bit more slowly. If I don't, you can see it just goes through all the color wheel. We don't want that unless you do. I think 4.7 worked for me last time. Yeah. And then I'm also going to bring the saturation down just a tiny bit, maybe 0.9. Okay, yeah. So that matches a lot more from a distance. And now we can actually make it a metallic texture, because right now it's just images that are slapped onto it. There's no light bouncing off of it or anything, but we'll change that right now by reintroducing the principled shader. We're going to plug that right in right before our material output, and then we'll take the metallic and pull that all the way up, and then start to pull our roughness down, and you can see what is happening there. Now, if I pull the roughness down all the way, we can see trees, and that is because we are using this built-in HDRI with the forest. And so you can use whatever HDRI you want. I'm just going to use one of the defaults. I'm going to use this one because it's got even shading. And this is going to give us a lot more of what I'm looking for, but this is too shiny, so I'm going to bring that roughness back up, I think, to 0.2. Okay. And so now our metal skull actually looks like a metal skull. We're combining reference images together that are just images, and a shader, which is 3D representation of light bouncing off of the object, and we've made it look metallic. So now we have something that looks like this. And of course, we've got a long way to go. This is not the final product, but doing this can give you inspiration, and it can help you to visualize what you could make and what the end product would be. When I first created the skull, doing things like this really helped boost my motivation and gave me a lot of inspiration of what to aspire to. And it showed that, oh, actually, I'm closer than I thought. And it really did help everything to start to fall into place. So there we go. That is it for this video. In the next video, we're going to continue to add more details to our skull. So whenever you're ready, head on over to the next one.